Imagine your entire ship exploding beneath your feet in the middle of the ocean, in the pitch black of night, with absolutely no warning at all, no alarm, no time to think. Imagine watching that ship swallowed whole by the sea in under 2 minutes, taking almost every single man you knew down into the dark water with it. Now imagine climbing onto a wooden raft barely the size of a small dining table, with a few tins of food, a little fresh water, and no idea whatsoever which direction land might be. Now imagine staying on that raft, not for a day, not for a week, not even for a month, for 133 days straight, completely and utterly alone, drifting across the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This is not a movie. This is not a novel. This actually happened to a real man, and by the time you finish this video, you will understand how a single human being managed to outsurvive an ocean that had already swallowed his entire ship whole. Stay till the end, because what this man built with nothing but his bare hands to stay alive will genuinely give you chills. November 23, 1942. World War II is raging across the globe, and out in the Atlantic, German U-boats are hunting Allied merchant ships like wolves moving silently through the dark. A British merchant vessel called the SS Ben Lomond is sailing quietly through these dangerous waters, carrying cargo and a crew of over 50 men across the ocean. Among them is a 24-year-old Chinese sailor named Poon Lim, working as a second steward aboard the ship. Nothing about this crossing feels unusual to him. He's made trips like this dozens of times before. It's supposed to be just another stretch of ocean to get through. Routine duties, routine watches, nothing that suggests today will be any different from yesterday. Then, without any warning at all, a torpedo fired from a German U-boat slams directly into the ship's hull. The explosion tears through the vessel almost instantly. Fire spreads fast across the deck. Water floods into the hull within seconds. Within minutes, the SS Ben Lomond is gone completely, swallowed by the ocean, dragging most of its crew down into the darkness with it. Poon Lim barely has enough time to grab a life jacket before he's thrown violently into the freezing Atlantic himself, surrounded by burning wreckage, oil slicks on fire across the water's surface, and the screams of men who will not survive the next few minutes of their lives. He swims. He swims away from the burning wreckage as hard and as fast as his exhausted body will allow, terrified that the fire spreading across the water will catch up to him too. After nearly 2 hours of struggling alone in the open ocean, barely able to keep his head above the waves, he finally finds it, a small wooden life raft, barely 8 feet long, the kind built specifically for emergencies just like this one. He pulls himself aboard with the last of his strength, exhausted, soaked completely through and utterly alone. Of the entire 50-plus man crew, he can see no one else anywhere around him, no lifeboats. No other survivors, just empty, endless ocean stretching out in every single direction, and the wreckage of his ship slowly disappearing beneath the waves behind him. The raft isn't completely empty, at least, which feels like a small mercy in that moment. Whoever stocked it left behind a few tins of biscuits, a small amount of chocolate, some emergency flares, a flashlight, and roughly 10 liters of fresh drinking water. It sounds like something to hold on to, until you realize this supply was only ever meant to last a day or two at most, nowhere close to the unimaginable stretch of time that is actually still ahead of him. Poon Lim does the only thing he can think to do. He immediately begins rationing everything he has, cutting his portions down to almost nothing right from the very first day, because somewhere in the back of his mind, he already understands that rescue might not be coming anytime soon, if it comes at all. Days pass. Then a full week. The small supply of biscuits and chocolate disappears fast despite his strict rationing, and the fresh water dwindles right along with it, drop by careful drop. And now the real question sets in, the one that would terrify absolutely anyone in his position. How exactly do you keep yourself alive on a raft the size of a dining table, in the middle of the largest ocean on the entire planet, with almost nothing left, and no way of knowing if a single ship will ever pass close enough to actually see you? This is where Poon Lim's story starts to become almost impossible to believe. Drawing on years of skills learned working aboard ships, he carefully unravels a length of rope from the raft's own structure and bends a small nail pulled from inside the flashlight into a crude makeshift fishing hook. He begins catching small fish with his bare hands whenever the hook fails him, slicing them open on the spot and eating them completely raw, drinking whatever moisture he can wring from their flesh on the days when there's no rainwater at all to collect. When sharks begin circling beneath and around the raft, and they do, more than once, drawn in by the blood and the stillness of the water, he doesn't simply hide from them and hope they pass. He actually manages, at real risk to his own life, to catch a small shark using nothing but his bare hands and that same makeshift hook, killing it and using its blood as drinking water and its dried flesh as food that could last him for several days afterward. Let that sink in for a second. This is a man fighting off sharks with his bare hands, on a wooden raft barely large enough for him to lie down flat on, with absolutely nothing standing between him and the open ocean except a few thin wooden planks that could crack or give out completely at any given moment. He collects rainwater carefully in a canvas cover whenever storms roll through overhead, sometimes going 3, 4, even 5 days at a stretch with almost nothing at all to drink before a single sudden downpour saves his life all over again. He forces himself to stay physically active every single day, moving his limbs and stretching his muscles so his body won't waste away completely from lying motionless for months on end in that cramped space. And when the crushing isolation threatens to break his mind the same way it has broken so many other men in his exact position, he keeps himself rigidly disciplined, rationing not just his food and his water, but his hope itself, refusing again and again to let despair take over completely even as the weeks stretch slowly into months with no ship, no plane, and no sign whatsoever of another human being anywhere on the horizon. Twice during those long months, ships actually passed close enough for him to see them clearly, close enough that his heart must have leapt into his throat both times. Once, a cargo ship spots him waving from his tiny raft and simply sails on without ever stopping to pick him up. Another time, he later recalls what he believes was a German U-boat surfacing near him, its crew taking one long look at the starving man on his raft before disappearing silently back beneath the waves, leaving him exactly where he was. Each and every time, the crushing hope of rescue rises up violently in his chest, and each time, it's ripped away from him just as fast, leaving him alone again with nothing around him but ocean stretching endlessly in every direction. Now here's the number that makes this entire story feel almost impossible to believe. By the time it was finally over, Poon Lim had survived completely alone on that tiny wooden raft for 133 straight days, not aboard a real boat with any kind of cabin or shelter from the sun and rain, not with any steady, reliable source of food or fresh water, on a raft roughly the size of a dining table, drifting entirely at the mercy of the Atlantic current, for well over 4 full months of his life, with nothing but sheer will keeping him going. And then, finally, in April of 1943, a Brazilian fishing family spotted his weathered raft drifting quietly near the coast of Brazil and pulled him carefully from the water. He was severely malnourished, his body wasted down to almost nothing after everything he had endured, but he was undeniably alive. And remarkably, he had actually walked off that raft on his own 2 feet without any real assistance at all. A detail that doctors who examined him afterward found almost impossible to believe given everything his body had been through. 133 days. To this very day, it remains one of the longest verified periods that any human being has ever survived completely alone at sea on a life raft, and it is still recognized in official record. Books as one of the single most extraordinary survival stories to emerge from the entire Second World War. The British Royal Navy was so genuinely stunned by what he had accomplished out there that they later brought him in to teach his own survival techniques directly to their sailors, turning his personal ordeal into official training material used for years afterward to help save the lives of other seamen in similar emergencies. King George VI personally awarded him a medal in recognition of his extraordinary courage and endurance, and his remarkable story quietly became something close to legend among merchant seamen for decades that followed. So what do we actually take away from a story like this one? It's incredibly easy to hear something like this and immediately think to yourself, there's absolutely no way I could ever survive that. And honestly, realistically, most people probably couldn't. But that's exactly what makes Poon Lim's story so remarkable, so haunting, and so genuinely fascinating to hear about. It shows in the most extreme way imaginable just how far human discipline, quiet patience, and the simple refusal to give up can actually carry a person when literally everything else in their life has been stripped completely away. No ship, no crew, no rescue in sight for well over 4 months straight, and somehow, against every possible odds stacked against him, he made it back home alive. Next time your own day feels unbearable or impossibly heavy to carry, try to remember that there was once a man who outlasted an entire ocean on a raft no bigger than a dining table, and he made it through to the other side. If this story hit you the same way it hit me while researching it, make sure you're subscribed, because there are survival stories out there even stranger and more extreme than this one, and I'm going to tell you every single one of them.